Be me, Ulrich, 28. I work as a remote audio transcriber for a massive corporate law firm, which is just a polite way of saying I sit in a dark room all day, with heavy headphones clamped over my ears, listening to muffled recordings of bitter property disputes, and typing every single stutter and throat clear into a blinding white document. By the time late October rolled around, my brain was completely fried. The mere sound of a new email notification made my shoulders tense up. I didn't just need a weekend away. I needed to completely disappear from the modern world for 3 days. I didn't want a nice hotel where I would just end up staring at my phone in a different room. I wanted absolute, uncompromising isolation. So I packed up my battered old Ford Ranger with a ridiculous amount of camping gear, bought 3 days' worth of grim-looking freeze-dried meals, and drove 4 hours north into the deep, unforgiving mountains. I picked a sprawling state reserve notorious for having zero cell service. The roads were heavily rutted dirt paths that scared off casual tourists. I wanted to make absolutely sure only the most antisocial people would be out there. After navigating miles of pine trees and rocks, I finally found a spot. It was at the very edge of the reserve, a small, uneven clearing surrounded by towering ancient pines. They completely blocked out the sky. It was perfect. The silence was so heavy it actually made my ears ring. I went through the slow grounding motions of setting up camp, pitched my oversized 4-person tent. I only bought it because I like having room to stretch out and keep my duffel bags inside. Chopped some firewood with an old axe. Boiled water on a little camping stove to rehydrate a bag of beef stroganoff. It tasted like salty cardboard. I sat in a canvas folding chair, watching the campfire die down to glowing red embers. By 9 at night, the temperature had dropped sharply into the low 40s. The darkness out there is absolute. With literally nothing else to do, I crawled into my heavy sleeping bag, pulled a wool beanie down over my eyes, and passed out completely content with my total removal from the human race. I am famously a very heavy sleeper. But there is a primal evolutionary alarm bell that goes off in your brain when you are totally alone in the dark woods and you hear something unnatural. I snapped awake. It was pitch black inside the tent. I lay perfectly still, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The freezing air stung my nose. I listened. There was the sound of dry leaves crunching right outside the thin nylon wall. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. My mind immediately raced through the worst-case scenarios. A black bear smelling my empty food wrappers, a wild boar, or some backwoods drifter who saw my fire. I slowly reached out in the dark, my hand blindly fumbling across the freezing tent floor until my fingers wrapped around the heavy metal handle of my heavy flashlight. I held my breath, waiting for the attack. Then I heard a sound that somehow terrified me more than a bear roaring. The crisp, mechanical, undeniably human sound of a zipper slowly being pulled up. My tent flap was opening. A blast of freezing night air swept into the enclosure. I was totally paralyzed, my brain completely failing to understand what was happening. Through the darkness, I could just barely make out a silhouette, crawling through the entrance on hands and knees. The intruder didn't have a flashlight. They didn't speak. But as they shuffled forward, a bizarre scent completely overpowered the smell of pine. It was the distinct smell of expensive vanilla perfume, mixed with stale white wine and wood smoke. The silhouette clumsily dragged itself forward, completely ignoring the fact that I was lying right there. They fumbled with the spare sleeping bag I had laid out next to mine for extra padding, violently unzipped it, crawled inside, let out a massive shuddering sigh that sounded like a deflating balloon, and within 30 seconds began snoring softly. My brain completely stopped working. I just lay there in the dark, clutching my heavy flashlight like an idiot. I had a complete stranger sleeping less than 2 feet away from me. If I turned on the light and yelled, they would inevitably scream, and I would be dealing with a hysterical person in the middle of the woods at 3 in the morning. If I quietly left the tent, I'd be freezing outside in the dark, while some random person slept in my bed. I spent the next 3 agonizing hours lying perfectly rigid, my eyes wide open, staring at the invisible ceiling of the tent, listening to her occasionally mumble nonsense in her sleep. Dawn finally broke around 6:30. The pale blue morning light slowly illuminated the interior of the tent. I turned my head by an inch to finally look at my intruder. It was a woman, maybe in her mid-20s. She had blonde hair that was wildly tangled and matted with dry pine needles. She was wearing a massive, oversized pink hoodie. It had the words Bride Tribe written across the back in sparkly gold lettering. but the front of it was completely caked in dried mud. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks in dark raccoon-like streaks. I slowly sat up, trying not to make a sound, but my sleeping bag rustled against the floor. Her eyes snapped open. She stared at the ceiling for 2 seconds, clearly disoriented. Then her eyes slowly drifted over to me. I am a large guy with a scruffy beard wearing a faded thermal shirt, sitting in a sleeping bag right next to her. The absolute terror that washed over her face was cinematic. She let out a blood-curdling, ear-piercing scream, scrambling backward and hitting the wall of the tent so hard it nearly collapsed. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, calm down," I yelled, putting my hands up in the air. "You broke into my tent?" She stopped screaming, but kept pushing herself against the nylon wall, breathing heavily like she had just run a marathon. "Who are you?" she gasped. "Where am I? Where is the glamping site? Where is Kendra?" "I have no idea who Kendra is," I said, trying to keep my voice as low and steady as possible. "You are at Site 42. You crawled in here in the middle of the night. You are the one who crashed my campsite." She blinked, looking down at her muddy clothes, then around at my ugly green utilitarian gear. The realization slowly seemed to dawn on her. She buried her face in her hands and let out a pathetic groan. "Oh my God," she whispered. Over the next deeply awkward 20 minutes, I boiled water for instant coffee outside. She sat by the dead fire pit wrapped in a blanket, shivering and explaining her situation. Her name was Keisha. She was part of a luxury bachelorette party happening at a glamping resort. According to my paper map, it was nearly 3 miles away through thick woods. They had been drinking heavily since noon the previous day. Around midnight, they got into a massive screaming argument. She had stormed off into the woods to find the fancy bathroom building and cool down. She got completely turned around in the pitch black, lost her phone somewhere in the brush, and kept walking blindly until she saw the vague shape of my tent. She assumed it was part of her group's extravagant setup and just collapsed. I handed her a chipped tin mug of black coffee. She took it with shaking hands. She looked absolutely shattered. "I need to get back to them," she whispered, staring into the black liquid. "My maid of honor is probably calling the forest rangers right now." I sighed heavily, mentally saying goodbye to my peaceful, isolated weekend. We packed up my entire camp in record time. I just threw everything into the back of my truck in a messy pile. I cleared a spot for her in the passenger seat, pushing aside a tangle of fishing gear and old paper receipts. I turned the heater on full blast because her teeth were literally chattering. We drove slowly down the winding logging roads, navigating by the crude map she drew on the back of a grocery receipt from memory. After 45 grueling minutes, we finally found the entrance to the luxury site. We pulled up to the designated spot. It was completely empty. There were 3 massive wooden platforms where huge canvas tents should have been, but they were gone. The only things left were a few tied-up trash bags leaning against a tree and the smoking remnants of a large fire. No cars, no people, nothing. She jumped out of the truck before I even put it in park. She ran to the fire pit, spinning around in disbelief. "They left," she yelled, her voice cracking. "They actually left me here." I stepped out of the truck and walked over to a wooden picnic table. There was a bright pink smartphone sitting squarely in the middle of it, weighed down by an empty wine bottle. I pointed to it silently. She scrambled over and grabbed it. Miraculously, there was a single bar of service up here on the ridge. She powered it on. It immediately began pinging with missed calls and voicemails. She hit speakerphone on the first voicemail. The voice that came out was piercing and dripping with venom. "Hey, it's Kendra. Look, if you are going to throw a massive temper tantrum, confess that you don't even like Hollis, and then literally hike to the highway to call an Uber without telling anyone. Fine. We are not playing your stupid games. We packed up. We are going back to the city. Have fun being a runaway bridezilla, you selfish idiot." The voicemail ended. The silence in the woods was deafening. A crow cawed somewhere far away. She stood there staring at the phone, tears welling up in her eyes, before her legs just gave out and she sat down hard in the dirt. She started hyperventilating, burying her muddy face in her knees. I rubbed my temples. I am not equipped for emotional breakdowns. I type legal documents for a living. I looked at my cheap wristwatch. It was 8:30 in the morning. "Look," I said, awkwardly kicking at a pine cone. "I was planning on staying here out of spite for 3 days, but I am not leaving you sitting in the dirt. Get in the truck. I will drive you back to the city." She looked up at me, mascara running down her face in dark rivers, and just nodded numbly. The drive back was supposed to take 4 hours. For the first hour, the silence in the cab of the truck was absolutely suffocating. I kept the radio on a low, static-filled classic rock station just to have some noise. Finally, as we hit the paved interstate, the dam broke. She started talking, and she didn't stop. She was 25. She was supposed to be marrying a guy named Hollis in exactly 3 weeks. Hollis worked in commercial real estate. Hollis was incredibly wealthy and incredibly controlling. He hated her friends. He hated her job as a freelance graphic designer, constantly suggesting she just quit and let him handle everything. The wedding had snowballed into a 400-person gala, paid for entirely by his parents, and she felt like a borrowed prop in a stage play. Last night, heavily intoxicated, she had confessed to her bridesmaids that she was making a massive mistake. She felt physically sick at the thought of walking down the aisle instead of supporting her. Her friends, led by Kendra, had accused her of ruining the weekend vibe, getting cold feet, and being ungrateful for the lavish lifestyle Hollis was offering. That is what caused the screaming match. That is why she walked into the woods. Sitting out there in the dirt, she said quietly, staring out the passenger window at the passing cars. I realized something terrifying. I am not scared of getting married. I am terrified of marrying him. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel tight. So don't marry him, I said bluntly. Better to cancel a giant party now than pay for a nasty divorce lawyer in 2 years. She looked at me for a long time. You make it sound so simple, she whispered. It is simple, I said. The fallout is a massive headache, but the actual decision is simple. By the time we hit the 2.5-hour mark, our stomachs were violently growling. We pulled off the highway and parked at a quintessential greasy spoon. It was called the Silver Star Diner. We walked in looking like absolute disaster victims. Me in an unwashed flannel and heavy boots. Her in a mud-caked bachelorette hoodie with raccoon eyes. We slid into a duct-taped red vinyl booth in the back corner. An older waitress named Rosalind with a faded name tag walked over. She poured us violently strong black coffee without even asking what we wanted. Keisha ordered a massive plate of chocolate chip pancakes. I ordered the biggest breakfast skillet they had. As she poured cheap syrup over her pancakes, she picked up her phone. She looked at me across the table, her expression hardening with sudden, bizarre resolve. I have to do it now, she said. If I wait until I get back to my cousin's house, he will talk me out of it. He always talks me out of it. She found Hollis's name in her contacts, hit call, and put the phone on the sticky table on speaker. It rang twice before he picked up. Where the hell are you? The voice on the other end wasn't worried. It was furious. Cold, sharp, and dripping with absolute authority. Keisha swallowed hard, but her voice held steady. I am on my way back to the city, she said. Look, Hollis, we need to talk. About the wedding. Oh, we are absolutely going to talk about the wedding, he snapped. Kendra called me this morning, completely sobbing. You completely abandoned your own party. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? My mother is asking questions. I have been fielding calls all morning. Where are you right now? I am at a diner on Route 9, she said, the Silver Star. But Hollis, listen to me. I am not doing it. I am calling off the wedding. There was a heavy 5-second pause. The diner background noise seemed to fade out. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously low. You are not calling off anything. You are having an emotional breakdown because you drank too much. You are going to stay exactly where you are. I am already driving upstate to find your stupid campsite. I am literally on Route 9 right now. I will be there in 10 minutes. Do not move. The line went dead. Keisha stared at the phone, her face draining of all color until she looked like a ghost. She looked across the table at me, panicking. I slowly put my thick diner fork down, a piece of bacon halfway to my mouth. Well, I said, chewing slowly, this is going to be incredibly awkward for me. She let out a panicked half laugh. I am so sorry, she stammered. You don't have to stay here. You can leave right now. I will just get an Uber from here. I am not leaving you at a truck stop diner to fight with your angry fiancé. I sighed, taking a massive gulp of the bitter coffee. Besides, I haven't finished my hash browns. Exactly 12 minutes later, a spotless black, aggressively oversized Audi SUV pulled violently into the gravel parking lot, spraying loose rocks everywhere. The driver's door flew open, and Hollis stepped out. He looked exactly as I pictured him. Immaculate, expensive, fleece vest, perfectly styled hair. Looking like he was late to yell at a junior employee, he stormed through the glass doors of the diner, completely ignoring the little bell chiming above his head, his eyes scanning the room until they walked onto our booth. He marched over his face, flushed with anger. He didn't even look at Keisha at first. He glared directly at me. "Who the hell is this?" he demanded, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "Did you seriously leave your bachelorette party to hook up with some random lumberjack trash?" I wiped my mouth with a cheap, thin paper napkin. "I am the guy whose tent she broke into because her friends abandoned her in the woods," I said, "and I transcribe legal documents for the record." "Shut up," Hollis snapped, turning his attention entirely to Keisha. He reached down and grabbed her upper arm tightly, pulling her to her feet. "Get in the car, Keisha," he ordered. "Now, we are leaving." "You are humiliating me in front of these diner people." Keisha flinched, but she dug her worn-out sneakers into the linoleum floor. She yanked her arm out of his grasp with surprising force. The entire diner had gone dead silent. The two tired truckers at the front counter had stopped eating. "Just watching the show." "Do not touch me," Keisha said. Her voice was shaking, but it was loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I told you on the phone. I am not going with you. I am not marrying you. It is over." Hollis let out a harsh, condescending laugh. "Stop being dramatic," he sneered. "The venue deposits are paid. My parents invited half their country club. You are just hungover and acting crazy. Get in the car." He reached for her arm again. That was my absolute limit. I stood up. I am 6'2" and I carry a lot of deadlift weight. I stepped out of the booth and placed myself squarely between Hollis and Keisha. I crossed my arms and looked down at him. "Hey man," I said, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "She said she is not going with you. I highly recommend you step back right now." Hollis's face turned an ugly shade of magenta. He looked me up and down, clearly trying to calculate if he could actually take me in a fight. He puffed out his chest in a pathetic show of dominance. "This is none of your business," he hissed. "Step aside before I call the cops." "Call them," I said evenly. "We can explain to them how you are trying to physically drag a woman out of a diner against her will. I am sure your parents will love reading the police report." He hesitated. He knew I was completely right. The public embarrassment was his ultimate weakness. He looked past me at Keisha, his face contorted in pure malice. "If you do this," he spat, "you are completely cut off. You get absolutely nothing. You will be back in that pathetic studio apartment eating ramen by Tuesday." Keisha didn't say a single word. She calmly reached down to her left hand, twisted the massive, obnoxiously large diamond engagement ring off her finger, and placed it on the sticky table right next to the glass syrup dispenser. She pushed it across the table toward him. Hollis stared at the ring like it was a live grenade. He snatched it off the table, gave me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, turned on his expensive leather heel, and stormed out of the diner. He slammed the heavy glass door so hard it rattled violently in its metal frame. We watched through the large front window as he peeled out of the parking lot, aggressively cutting off a delivery truck on the highway. I let out a long breath I didn't realize I was holding, and slid back into the vinyl booth. Keisha stood there for a long moment, staring out at the empty parking space. Before collapsing back into her seat, she put her hands over her face. I genuinely thought she was going to start crying again. Instead, her shoulders started shaking, and a weird, strained sound escaped her lips. She was laughing. It started as a breathless, tiny giggle, and quickly escalated into full-blown, tear-inducing laughter. The waitress Roslyn walked over slowly, holding a fresh glass pot of coffee. She looked at the front door, then down at us, and casually topped off our ceramic mugs. "Well," Roslyn drawled, leaning on the table, "that was a hell of a lot better than my morning soap operas. Breakfast is on the house, honey." You just dodged a massive bullet. We finished our heavy food in a much lighter, completely surreal atmosphere. I left a massive cash tip on the table, and we walked out into the cold morning air and got back into my truck. The rest of the drive into the city limits was incredibly easy. We listened to the radio, joked about the absolute absurdity of the last 12 hours, and talked about nothing of consequence. I navigated through the heavy city traffic, and finally pulled up to the address she had given me. It was her cousin Tabitha's brick townhouse. She grabbed her muddy weekend bag from the back seat. She opened the heavy passenger door. But before she got out, she turned back to me. The awkwardness was suddenly back in the cab of the truck, but it was a different kind of heavy, lingering awkwardness. "I literally ruined your entire escape from humanity," she said, a small, tired smile playing on her lips. "You did," I agreed, keeping my face completely deadpan. "It was easily the worst camping trip of my entire life." She laughed quietly, leaned over the bulky center console, and gave me a tight, sudden hug. She smelled like cheap diner syrup, stale campfire smoke, and that vanilla perfume. It was oddly intoxicating. "Thank you," she whispered right against my shoulder, "for absolutely everything." She pulled away, grabbed a crumpled napkin from my open glove box, quickly scribbled something on it with a cheap plastic pen from her bag, and tossed it into my dusty cup holder. She hopped out of the truck, waved once without looking back, and walked quickly up the concrete steps to her cousin's painted door. I waited idling at the curb until she was safely inside, before shifting into drive and pulling away. As I drove down the street, I looked down at the crumpled white napkin. Written in messy blue ink was a phone number, and right below it, "For when you are back from the woods." 4 days pass. I am back at my cheap particle board desk in my apartment. My eyes are burning from staring at the glowing transcripts again. I am typing out a dispute over a commercial retaining wall. It is agonizingly boring. I haven't texted her yet, because I am a complete coward who overthinks every single social interaction. But that muddy napkin is currently sitting right next to my mechanical keyboard, and I haven't stopped staring at it all morning. My apartment is a disaster. Empty coffee mugs everywhere. A pile of junk mail on the counter. I finally pick up my phone, stare at the numbers, and punch them in before I can talk myself out of it. It rings 3 times. She picks up. "Hello," she says, her voice sounding incredibly tired. "Hey," I say, rubbing the back of my neck. "It's Ulrich, from the woods." There is a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Ulrich," she says, sounding suddenly awake. "Hi, I didn't think you were actually going to call." "I was looking at the napkin," I say awkwardly. "Figured I should check if you survived the fallout." She lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh. "Barely," she says. "My phone has been blowing up non-stop. Hollis canceled all my credit cards because they were tied to his joint account. And apparently my car got towed from the hotel parking lot where we met up for the bachelorette thing, because I left it in a restricted zone in my rush to get in Kendra's car." I wince. "That sounds like a complete nightmare," I say. "It gets worse," she mutters. "The tow yard won't let me get the car without paying a massive fee, and I literally have zero access to cash right now. My cousin Tabitha is out of town for work until tomorrow. I am totally stuck in this house." I look at the glowing white document on my screen, the retaining wall dispute. I hit save and close the laptop entirely. "Where's the tow yard?" I ask. She pauses. "You don't have to do this," she says softly. "You already rescued me once." "I am currently avoiding my actual job," I tell her, "and driving you to a miserable impound lot sounds way better than typing. Send me the address." 30 minutes later, I pull up to the townhouse again. She walks out, wearing a faded denim jacket that clearly belongs to her cousin. She looks completely drained, but she smiles when she sees my truck. She climbs in. "Thanks for this," she says, buckling up. I feel like a complete burden. I put the truck in gear. "You owe me lunch eventually," I say. "Deal," she says. We drive out to the industrial edge of the city. The towing company is located behind a massive rusted chain-link fence. The lot is packed with dusty cars and smells strongly of diesel and wet garbage. We walk into the tiny portable office building. It is aggressively hot inside. There is a miserable-looking guy sitting behind a thick, scratched plexiglass window. He is wearing a stained polo shirt and chewing gum loudly. Keisha steps up to the glass. "Hi, I am here for the Subaru Outback," she says, sliding her driver's license under the slot. The guy slowly types on a keyboard that looks like it is from the 90s. "Yeah, we got it," he grunts. $350. Cash or card?" "Card," she says, pushing her cousin's emergency debit card under the glass. The guy swipes it, stares at his screen. "Declined," he says, popping his gum. Keisha's face drops. What she says, panicking. "Can you run it again? Tabitha said there was money on it." "Declined again," he says, looking annoyed. "You got another card, lady?" Keisha steps back, looking completely defeated. She puts her hands over her face. "I can't catch a break," she whispers. I step up to the window, pull my wallet out of my back pocket, and slide my own credit card under the glass. "Run this one," I say. The guy shrugs and swipes it. It prints a long receipt. He pushes it back to me with a cheap pen. "Sign at the bottom," he barks. Keisha grabs my arm. "Ulrich, no," she says. "That is so much money. I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask," I say, scribbling my messy signature on the receipt. "You can just add it to my tab." The guy slides a dirty set of keys under the glass. "Spot 47 in the back," he mutters. We walk out into the cold, windy lot. She is gripping the keys tight. "I am going to pay you back," she says fiercely. "Every single cent." "I know," I say, shoving my hands in my pockets. "Let's just get your car. We find the Subaru covered in a thin layer of industrial dust. It starts up fine. She rolls down the window. I need to go to the store to get some actual clothes and toothpaste, she says. All my stuff is still at Hollis's apartment, and I refuse to go back there right now. You want to just follow me to the big Target near the highway? I nod. Yeah, I'll follow you. We drive in a weird two-car convoy to the massive suburban shopping center. The parking lot is packed. We grab a red plastic cart with a squeaky front wheel. We are walking through the bright fluorescent aisles. She is grabbing cheap multi-packs of socks and travel-size shampoo bottles. The tension from the tow yard is finally bleeding off. She starts making jokes about the terrible graphic design on the body wash labels. I am actually laughing. We turn the corner into the home goods aisle and freeze. Standing directly in front of us examining a blender is an older woman. She is wearing heavy jewelry and a tight beige sweater. Keisha visibly shrinks. Oh my God, she whispers terrified. It's my Aunt Estelle. We try to back up the cart, but the squeaky wheel betrays us. Aunt Estelle turns around. Her eyes widen in absolute shock. Keisha, she gasps loudly. What on earth are you doing here? Your mother has been leaving voicemails all morning. Hollis's family is in complete chaos. You just vanished. Keisha grips the red plastic handle of the cart until her knuckles turn white. Hi, Aunt Estelle, she says, her voice shaking. I am just running some errands. Errands, Aunt Estelle practically shouts. A woman in the next aisle over looks at us. You canceled a 400-person wedding after your mother got the text. Hollis is absolutely devastated. He says you ran off with some horrible man from a diner. Aunt Estelle finally looks at me, her eyes scanning my plain gray hoodie and worn-out jeans. Her face scrunches up in intense disgust. Is this the man she demands, pointing a sharp finger at me? Is this why you are throwing your entire future away? For some random guy you met at a truck stop. Keisha looks like she is about to cry from the sheer public embarrassment. I step forward naturally, placing myself slightly in front of the cart. Hi, Estelle. I say, extending a hand she completely ignores. I'm Ulrich. We are just trying to buy some toothpaste. Maybe we can have this massive family intervention somewhere that doesn't sell discounted towels. Estelle bristles, completely offended. You stay out of this, she snaps. Keisha, you need to call Hollis right now. He is willing to forgive this little stunt if you just apologize to his mother. Keisha straightens her back. The shaking suddenly stops. I am not apologizing to anyone, she says loudly, her voice echoing slightly in the vast store. And I am not marrying Hollis. Please tell my mom I will call her tonight. But you need to leave me alone right now. She grabs my sleeve. Come on, Ulrich, she says, pulling me down the aisle. We leave the cart sitting right there in the middle of the floor and power walk toward the bright red exit doors. Aunt Estelle is still yelling something about deposits fading in the background. We get out to the parking lot. The cold air hits us. Keisha is breathing fast. I can't go back to Tabitha's house, she says, leaning against my truck. Estelle is definitely driving straight there to ambush me. I don't have anywhere else to go. I pull my keys out of my pocket. Just come to my place, I say, without overthinking it. It's completely messy, and I only have stale coffee. But nobody knows where it is. She looks at me with immense relief. Okay, she whispers. She leaves her car parked in the lot and just gets into my truck. We drive across town to my cheap apartment complex. We walk up the concrete stairs to the second floor. I unlock the door and push it open. My apartment is exactly as I left it. A total disaster. There are empty takeout containers on the small dining table, a pile of mail on the counter, my running shoes thrown haphazardly by the door, a faded blue blanket crumpled on the cheap gray sofa. I am so sorry about the mess, I say hurriedly, kicking a stray Tupperware lid under the coffee table. I wasn't expecting company, ever. She walks in and looks around. She doesn't look disgusted. She just looks entirely safe. It's perfect, she says, dropping her bag on the floor. She sits down heavy on the sofa, pulling the blue blanket over her lap. I walk into the small kitchen. I am going to order the greasiest Chinese food in the city, I announce. And we are not going to talk about weddings or tow yards for at least 2 hours. She smiles a real, genuine smile. That sounds amazing, she says. An hour later, we are sitting on the cheap rug in my living room. The coffee table is covered in white cardboard takeout boxes. We are eating beef and broccoli straight from the cartons with wooden chopsticks. There are little packets of soy sauce scattered everywhere. She is wearing my oversized gray hoodie because the heating in my building is terrible. The sleeves are pulled down over her hands. We are watching some terrible action movie on the TV with the volume turned low. She reaches across the table to grab a stray egg roll. Her hand brushes mine. I look at her, sitting in my messy apartment, wearing my clothes, eating cheap food, and I feel this massive, terrifying shift in my chest. It isn't just a crazy story from the woods anymore. I am completely, fully invested in this disaster. She catches me looking at her. What she asks, chewing on the egg roll. Nothing, I say, quickly looking back at the TV. Just wondering how you managed to make a stained hoodie look good. She kicks my leg gently under the table. Shut up, she laughs. The comfortable silence settles over us again. But then her pink phone vibrates loudly against the wood of the coffee table. The screen lights up. It is a text from Tabitha. Hollis is out of town for a golf weekend starting tomorrow morning. You need to get your stuff out of his apartment before he comes back. Keisha stares at the screen. The mood in the room instantly evaporates. She looks sick. I have to go there, she says quietly. All my freelance equipment is there. My drawing tablet, my laptop, my hard drives. If I don't get them now, he will hold them hostage forever. She looks at me, the unasked question hanging heavy in the air. I start packing the leftover rice into a plastic Tupperware container. What time does he leave for golf, I ask. 8 a.m., she says. Then we will be at his door by 8:30, I tell her, snapping the lid onto the container. The next morning, the sky is completely gray and threatening rain. We pull up to Hollis's luxury high-rise building in my beat-up truck. The parking valet looks at my rusty bumper with open contempt. Keisha uses her old key fob to get us through the massive glass lobby. We ride the silent, mirrored elevator up to the 14th floor. My stomach is tied in terrible knots. She unlocks the heavy wooden door to the apartment. It looks like a museum. Everything is glass and chrome and perfectly vacuumed white carpets. It doesn't look like anyone actually lives here. Keisha completely ignores the expensive furniture. She walks straight to the back bedroom and starts throwing things into cardboard boxes. I help her. We are working in frantic, terrified silence, waiting for the front door to suddenly open. I am packing heavy winter coats and expensive-looking shoes into a large box. She is meticulously wrapping her digital drawing monitor in a thick wool blanket. We tape the boxes shut with loud ripping sounds that echo in the quiet apartment. We start making the long, grueling trips down the hallway to the service elevator. My back is absolutely screaming. We are carrying heavy, awkward boxes of art books and winter gear. We finally get everything piled up near the loading dock in the back alley. I am sweating through my shirt, just as I pick up the last heavy box full of kitchen stuff. My phone starts ringing violently in my pocket. I balance the box on my knee and manage to fish the phone out. It is Lowell, my boss from the transcription firm. I answer it, balancing the box awkwardly. Ulrich, where the hell are the files for the zoning dispute? Lowell barks loudly through the speaker. The lawyers need them by noon. I wince, feeling a massive spike of stress. I am having a minor family emergency, Lowell. I lie smoothly, trying not to drop a box of ceramic bowls on the concrete. I will have them uploaded by tonight, I promise. You better. He snaps and hangs up. I shove the phone back in my pocket. We load the last box into the bed of my truck. Keisha slams the tailgate shut. She wipes her forehead, leaving a smudge of dirt on her skin. We did it, she says, breathless. It's all here. We turn to walk to the cab of the truck and freeze. Pulling slowly into the alleyway blocking the exit is the massive black Audi SUV. Hollis is behind the wheel. He sees us standing by my truck and slams on the brakes. He throws the car in park and jumps out. He is wearing expensive golf clothes. He looks absolutely unhinged. What do you think you are doing? He yells, marching toward us. His face is pale with fury. I forgot my clubs, he shouts, pointing at Keisha. And I find you stealing from my apartment like a common criminal. Keisha steps back, hitting her shoulders against my truck. I am not stealing, Hollis, she says, her voice trembling. These are my things, my clothes, and my work equipment. Nothing belongs to you, he snarls, stepping closer. I paid the rent on that place. I bought the groceries. You owe me everything. He lunges past her and grabs the edge of a medium-sized box sitting near the tailgate. It's the box with the ceramic plates and casserole dishes. Put it back, he demands, trying to yank it out of the truck bed. Keisha grabs the other side of the cardboard flap. Stop it, she screams. That was my grandmother's dish. Hollis yanks hard. The cardboard tears violently. I step forward, moving faster than I thought I could. I slam my hand down on Hollis's chest and shove him backward hard. He stumbles, releasing the box. But the momentum sends the box tipping over the edge of the tailgate. It hits the concrete alley floor with a sickening crash. The sound of thick ceramic shattering echoes loudly off the brick walls. The casserole dish is completely destroyed. Shards of painted pottery scattered across the dirty asphalt. Everyone stops moving. The silence is absolute. Hollis stares at the broken glass, then looks up at me, his fists clenched. I stand perfectly still, my jaw locked tight. I am entirely ready for him to swing at me. "Do it," I say quietly. "Throw a punch, Hollis. Let's see how that looks on the security cameras." I point up to the black dome camera mounted above the loading dock. Hollis looks up, follows my finger. He slowly lowers his hands, his chest heaving. He turns to Keisha, trying to salvage some kind of control. "Look what you made happen," he says, his voice shaking with anger. "Look at this mess you made." Keisha looks down at the broken pieces of her grandmother's dish. Then she looks up at Hollis, and the fear in her eyes is completely gone, replaced by an overwhelming cold clarity. "No," she says, her voice completely steady. "You broke it. You break absolutely everything you touch because you can't stand when things aren't yours." Hollis opens his mouth to speak, but she cuts him off, stepping directly into his space. "I am done, Hollis. I am taking my things and I am leaving. If you ever contact me again, if you ever call my family again, I will file a restraining order so fast it will make your head spin. Now move your stupid car before we call the police." Hollis stares at her. He is completely lost. He knows it. He looks small and pathetic in his expensive golf clothes. He turns around, walks back to his Audi without saying another word, gets in, and aggressively reverses out of the alley, leaving us alone with the broken glass. Keisha stands there, staring at the empty space where his car was. She lets out a massive, shuddering breath. I walk over to the pile of shattered ceramic, start carefully kicking the larger, sharp pieces out of the way of the tires. "Come on," I say gently. "Let's go home." We get into the truck. The drive back to my apartment is completely silent. But it isn't a heavy, awkward silence. It is the exhausted silence of surviving a massive storm. We park at my complex. We spend the next hour slowly carrying the boxes up the concrete stairs, stacking them neatly in the spare empty corner of my small living room. We don't say much. Just the quiet sounds of cardboard scraping on the floor and heavy breathing. Finally, the last box is placed on top of the stack. The physical labor is done. I walk into the kitchen and grab 2 cold bottles of water from the fridge. I walk back into the living room and hand her one. She takes it and leans back against the stack of her boxes. She looks around the messy apartment, the Tupperware on the table, my jacket thrown over the chair, the pile of junk mail. She takes a sip of the water, so she says softly, staring at the floor, "What happens now?" I walk over to the small kitchen counter. I pull my heavy truck keys out of my pocket and drop them onto the counter with a loud, metallic clatter. They sit there next to the crumpled, muddy napkin she gave me 4 days ago. I smoothed it out and left it there on purpose. I lean against the counter and look at her. Now I say quietly, "I finished typing a massive dispute about a retaining wall, and you figure out where you want to put your coffee mug." She looks up at me, her tired eyes welling up with sudden quiet tears. She smiles, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "Yeah," she whispers. "That sounds really nice." The apartment is completely quiet. The hum of the old refrigerator kicks on in the background. I look at the muddy napkin on the counter. I'm never going camping again.